And folks, we're going to get started in just 1 minute. I'll sit in your chair and then after president.
Musical chair, don't we?
Good afternoon. The time is 5:32 p.m. on January 18th, 2017, and this public meeting of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is now called to order. Do we have the start with the quorum, or do we start?
We'll start with quorum, but you can switch now if you want.
As this is the first meeting of this board period, the dean of our board will hold the chair until our leadership elections, and so I'm going to turn the gavel over to Mark Jones, our Ward 5 member, who is our longest tenured member. Mr. Jones?
Good evening. I gained a new title, Dean. Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Good evening. The time is 5:35 on January 18th, 2017, and this public meeting of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is now called to order. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Mr. Hayworth, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Jacobson.
Present.
Ms. Williams.
Present.
Ms. Carter. Present. Ms. Wilson-Phelan.
Present.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Present.
Dr. Woodruff.
Present.
Mr. Jones.
Present.
Mr. Whedon.
Present.
Mr. Batchelor.
Present.
Ms. Hall. Ms. Hall. Mr. DeRosen. Mr. DeRosen. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Hayworth. A quorum has been determined, and the State Board will proceed now with the business portion of the meeting. Now, each year, the State Board must elect a president and vice president to provide leadership and oversight. Now, as the longest-serving member of the State Board, it is my honor to serve as the election officer of the role of president. And prior to entertaining nominations, I'd like to use my executive privilege to make a note in reference to our outgoing president, Mr. Jack Jacobson. I'd like to say it's been an honor and a pleasure to serve with him. And as president and leader of this board, I've watched him grow in compassion. I've watched him grow in his thoughtfulness. And he is not leaving the board. He will continue to serve the board as I did when I moved on from president. And so Jack and I will continue to serve on the board. And it's been a pleasure to have you, Jack, serve in our leadership. And it's going to be an honor to continue to serve with you.
Thank you, Mark.
Now I will entertain nominations for president. And note, seconds are not needed for nominations.
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Jacobson?
It's my distinct honor to nominate Karen Williams, the current Vice President and Ward 7 member, as President of the Board of Education.
Thank you. So duly noted. Are there any other nominations? Seeing no further nominations, we have one candidate, Ms. Karen Williams from Ward 7, for the position of president. If one candidate, it's basically by acclamation, but for the rules, I believe we do have to call roll, correct?
We don't have to call roll, but we can if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I'd like to record by calling the roll. So, Mr. Hayworth, if you will, please.
Mr. Jacobson.
Aye.
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Carter.
Aye.
Ms. Wilson-Phelan.
Aye.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Aye.
Dr. Woodruff.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Whedon.
Aye.
Mr. Batchelor.
Aye.
Ms. Hall. Ms. Hall. Mr. DeRosen. Mr. DeRosen. Mr. Chair, the vote is unanimous.
The vote is unanimous, and I'd like to now welcome our new president, Ms. Karen Williams from Ward 7.
I'd like to take a moment to thank the members of the board for this honor to serve and to work with you. It's been a pleasure working with you the past 2 years as vice president, and I hope we can keep up the pace that we've established in the past. Thank you all so much. I will now entertain motions for the vice president. Yes, Lynette?
I'd like to nominate Madam President. I'm learning this curve here. I would like to nominate Jack Jacobson for Vice President.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other nominations? Seeing no further nominations, we have one candidate for the position of Vice President, Jack Jacobson from Ward 2. Should we have a Mr. No. Well, Mr. Hayworth, would you call the roll? Vote, please.
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson. Aye. Ms. Carter.
Aye.
Ms. Wilson-Phelan.
Aye.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Aye.
Dr. Woodruff.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Whedon.
Aye.
Mr. Batchelor.
Aye.
Ms. Hall. Ms. Hall. Mr. DeRosen. Mr. DeRosen. Madam President, the vote is unanimous.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Jacobson. I look forward to your assistance as the State Board continues to work to increase academic achievement and equality in the district. Everybody's okay. Now, if you would pardon us for a minute, we'll take a 5-minute recess for our 2017 class photo. Thank you.
Okay, everyone can come down.
I don't have a necktie on. Hey. How are you, sweetheart?
Lynette, why don't you move over just a touch, and Ashley, and then Marcus. All right, that looks good, man.
Okay, it's set to selfie. We don't want that. State Board of Education. All righty.
Great. Thank you all. John Paul, should I move the chairs?
Thank you for your patience. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. I would like to ask that the agenda be modified to include a vote on a resolution requested by the Ombudsman related to the domicile requirement for employees in our office. Because this resolution is out of our regular order, it requires a vote to suspend the rules in order to proceed. Therefore, I move the rules be suspended for the purpose of adding State Board Resolution 17-3 to the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion being properly, moved and seconded, I will ask for yeas and nays. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is approved. Under suspension of the rules, I move that Resolution 17-3 be added to the agenda. Is there an objection?
It would go,
That's a good question.
it would be in order under the approval of the committee resolution 17-2.
Are there additional corrections or additions to the agenda?
Oh, yes. Thank you. I move to amend the agenda by taking the committee report from the ESSA committee. Yeah, I move to amend the agenda by moving the committee report on the ESSA, from the ESSA committee, which is implicitly at the end of this agenda, though it's not listed, up to to become, I guess, the new number 9.
Second?
Second.
Can you second it?
Discussion, please.
Ms. Laura Phelan?
I don't understand actually what you were talking about. Is this just a report out?
Yes, it's a report out, and It was discussed with basically everybody except you, because you came in late, about it's going to be an opportunity to talk before we move into the full report.
Any more discussion? Are there any objections to the motion? Seeing no additional changes, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. All in favor say yea.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
That says yea. And all opposed say nay. Any opposed? The motion is approved. Next on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the January 4th working session. Are there corrections or additions to the minutes?
Oh, yes. I have one
Ms.
correction.
Wattenberg?
Yes, on line 194, my
Ms. Wattenberg, is your microphone on?
Yes. On line 194, my sentence cuts off in the middle, and I just wanted to add the remainder. It says, Ms. Wattenberg asked Ms. Kong, how much better than average would a school have to be to not end up in the bottom 25%, and what got dropped, bottom 25% of schools, if 75% of the students in that school began the year having earned 1s and 2s on PARC, when the rating system only counts 4s and 5s and 3s partially. And I can send that to you.
Are there objections to this amendment? None is accepted. So we entertain a motion to approve the minutes. And is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
I will ask for, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. The motion is approved. All right. Good evening. In case you don't know, my name is Karen Williams, the Ward 7 representative, and 10 minutes ago, the president of the State Board of Education. On behalf of the members of the District of Columbia State Board of Education, I want to welcome our guests and our viewing public to our Wednesday, January 18th public meeting. The State Board typically holds its regularly scheduled meetings on the third Wednesday of every month here in the Old Council Chambers at 441 4th Street Northwest. Tonight is the first public meeting of the State Board in 2017, but the State Board has already held multiple committee meetings and working sessions in the first 3 months of this year. We are committed to increasing the productivity of the State Board. I want to thank my predecessor again, Jack Jacobson, for his leadership over the past 2 years and his mentorship that helped me obtain the seat tonight, and his commitment to the development of the State Board as a partner in the DC educational landscape. We will begin our meeting tonight with votes on 2 resolutions related to the administration of the State Board and its component offices. The State Board will continue its work related to Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. Our friends at OSSE will be presenting tonight on the consolidated state plan that is required by the U.S. Department of Education. As my colleagues know, the State Board has approval authority over the statewide accountability system section of the state plan. I look forward to hearing more about the remainder of the plan. I also want to note that in the coming days, OSSE and the State Board will be releasing a list of community meetings that cover every ward in the district. These meetings will coincide with the public release of the district's draft accountability plan. The State Board and OSSE are committed to public engagement in the development of a plan, and these meetings will assist both agencies in the determinations needed prior to a vote of the State Board. If you're interested in learning more about ESSA and its potential for district students, please visit our website at sboe.dc.gov/ESSA. There you will find a wealth of information about our work. Before we move to our administrative votes and public comment session, I would like to invite our State Superintendent of Education, Hansel Kong, to provide opening remarks.
Thank you, President Williams. I wanted to begin by congratulating Karen Williams as our new president and Jack Jacobson as our new vice president. I've appreciated the chance to work with both of them to date and look forward to continuing our strong partnership together in the future. I also wanted to congratulate the 3 new members of the State Board on their first official public meeting, Lynette Woodruff, Ashley Carter, and Marcus Batchelor. I'm looking forward to working closely with all of you as well. I wanted to note that tonight we are continuing the dialogue we've been having for almost a year now on the Every Student Succeeds Act, and we've certainly appreciated the thoughtful dialogue that we've engaged in and the feedback we've received to date. We feel we've had a productive dialogue, in particular at the last working session and in a continued conversation with my staff last week. And we look forward to continuing the conversation we've been having both with the board and with the wide range of views that have been expressed by the community that we are all hearing from. We look forward to continuing to hear that feedback and make refinements to our accountability system, both prior to the release of our draft state plan for public comment at the end of this month, but also in reflection and reaction to that public comment period prior to submission in April. So we look forward to further refinements over the coming months. And finally, as President Williams noted, we are pleased tonight to be able to present on the full state plan that we will be submitting to the U.S. Department of Education, of which accountability is a substantial portion, but certainly not the only portion. We think this will be a helpful frame for everybody to learn about all of the different pieces for which we will need to submit responses to the U.S. Department of Education. So we look forward to continuing the productive dialogue that we've been having with the board and look forward to continuing to address the feedback that's been shared.
Thank you very much. Before we move on, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of our student rep, Jemiah Hall. Thank you. The State Board of Education consists of 9 elected members and 2 student reps. In order to complete our work we have before us, it is necessary for us to create a committee structure that will help the State Board function as efficiently as possible. This year, I am proposing the creation of 5 committees. The first of these committees is actually spelled out in our bylaws as a standing committee. This committee will have authority over the general administration and budget for the State Board, including setting office goals, performance evaluations for senior staff, position descriptions, and general oversight. The bylaws state that the Vice President should chair this committee. Mr. Jacobson has recommended that Joe Wheaton be designated as chair. The committee members will be Mark Jones of Ward 5, Dr. Woodruff of Ward 4. The second committee is the Student Advisory Committee. This committee is co-chaired by our student representative, Alex Dorson, and Jemiah Hall, and is open to other students attending public or public charter schools in the District of Columbia. The third committee is called the Academic Excellence and Equity Committee, chaired by Laura Wilson Phelan of Ward 1. This committee will have jurisdiction over regulatory and policy approvals. She is joined on this committee by Ashley Carter at large, Mark Jones of Ward 5. Ruth Wattenberg of Ward 3 will continue to chair the ESSA Accountability Plan Committee with Jack Jacobson, Ward 2, Joe Wheaton, Ward 6, and Ashley Carter at large, and Dr. Woodruff from Ward 4 and Marcus Baylor from Ward 8. This committee will be very busy in the coming months as we work with OSSE on our accountability plan and other items required by ESSA. Finally, I am pleased to propose the creation of the Public Engagement and Outreach Committee chaired by Marcus Batchelor of Ward 8. This committee will be composed of Jack Jacobson, Ward 2, and Laura Wilson Phelan of Ward 1. This committee will continue and expand the work that Laura began last year on including proportionate voices in the decisions of the board. Members, we have a resolution before us. Is there a motion on this resolution?
I'd like to make an amendment.
I'll move the resolution.
Second.
Ms. Phelan? Ms. Laura Phelan.
I would just like to recommend 2 changes associated with the titles of these committees to make it clear to the public with their purpose. I'd recommend on line 19 that the standing committee be renamed Administration and Budget. And I would recommend that on line 27, the Academic Excellence and Equity Committee be renamed Educational Excellence and Equity.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I would take that as a friendly amendment,
Great.
if it's okay with the second, Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Okay,
I'd like to move the question.
go ahead. I'm sorry. The motion on State Board Resolution 1712-2. Without objection, I will waive the reading of the resolution. If there's no further discussion,
Madam President,
yes?
quick discussion.
Point of order. The question's been called.
Fair. Thank you, Madam President.
Laura called the question.
All right. All right, so we vote now. Sorry, Ms. Bethel. I will ask for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is approved. Under our bylaws, the Ombudsman for Public Education has exclusive authority over the employees within that office. As the board is aware, employees in her office serve in the accepted service category. This service requires that employees be domiciled in the District of Columbia. The Ombudsman has requested a blanket waiver of this provision. Is there a motion on this resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is, any discussion?
Discussion.
Yes, Ms. Wilson-Fallon.
I do understand there are several amendments to this. I would like to just state for the record that I am really challenged by this resolution, which waives the requirement that those who work in the Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education reside in the District of Columbia, because I don't think we should issue a blanket waiver for any kind of role that requires such a deep and integrated knowledge of our city. But secondarily, for the positions that are under consideration, one of them, we knew that this was a requirement before it was posted, and I just want to state that for the record.
My turn.
Any other discussion? Yes, Dr.
I have an amendment to the resolution 17-3. My amendment would ensure that the state board is on record that waivers of this nature are very unusual, and we are taking this step upon request of the Ombudsman.
Madam President, could she repeat the,
You didn't hear?
her concern? I didn't hear it.
Would you repeat that, please?
Yes. Madam President, I have an amendment to Resolution 17-3. My amendment would ensure that the State Board is on record that waivers of this nature are very unusual, and we are taking this step upon request of the Ombudsman.
Thank you. Any other? Mr. Haywood, would you read the amendment, please?
The amendment from Dr. Woodruff. In the appropriate place, insert, whereas the State Board believes that this waiver should be granted only in unique circumstances and should not be extended or applied to any further positions or employees.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, a vote on resolution. Okay, before we vote on the resolution, we vote on the amendment. Can we have a vote on acceptance of the amendments presented?
So moved.
So moved? Yeah. I'm sorry, I'll get this down. Yeah. Okay, so resolution 17-13 has been approved. No?
No.
We have to vote on the amendment.
Sorry.
Dr. Woodruff's amendment.
Oh, so, I'm sorry. All right, can we take a vote on the amendment from Dr. Woodruff? I will ask for the, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
The amendment is approved.
Madam President, I have an amendment as well.
Mr. Whedon?
I would like to echo my colleague, Ms. Wilson-Phelan's concerns about this amendment, and as well as my strong support for Dr. Woodruff's amendment. I strongly believe that we need to make clear that this was brought to the board by the Ombudsman, and that we should not issue blanket statements. Individuals working in these positions should have a deep and intimate knowledge of the district, of our neighborhoods, and of our students. And with that, I would like our executive director to read my proposed amendment, striking the last sentence due to the passage of the previous amendment.
The amendment by Mr. Whedon. In line 9, insert, and the SBOE believes that all employees of the office of the SBOE should be district residents, as their work requires an intimate knowledge of the district, its neighborhoods, and its people, in place of the words, but such a waiver of the domicile requirement can be issued for cause. And insert a new second clause that reads, whereas a waiver of the domicile requirement can be issued for cause. And in line 15, delete the board's bylaws and policies and procedures manual as well as pending legislation. And in line 19, insert the words as requested after the word authorize. And in line 21, delete the words pending legislation. And insert a new clause on line 23 that reads, whereas the Office of the Ombudsman has requested that the State Board of Education issue a waiver for the domiciliary requirement for the Associate Ombudsman position. And in lines 24, insert the word a prior to the word waiver. And in line 25, insert the words the Assistant Ombudsman position before the word within.
Are there discussions on the amendments?
Point of information, we need a second before we have
Second.
discussion.
Second.
Any discussion on the amendments?
Discussion.
Ms. Laura, Ms.
Joe, where you say on line 25, insert the words assistant ombudsman position, that would mean that that's an exempted position from here on out, regardless of who occupies it, correct? Because you've eliminated the last part of your amendment.
But with the previous amendment that we just approved, the State Board believes that this waiver should be granted only in unique circumstances and should not be extended or applied to any further positions or employees. My intent would be that it applies to the current two individuals who are being considered for these two positions and these two specific waivers.
Could I make a friendly suggestion that you actually include the original two sentences that you had on your amendment to make that just really explicit?
And if I could interject on that, if it's in order, I would suggest, since these are personnel decisions, that specific names not be included.
Madam President, as a matter of also additional clarification, the positions are actually assistant ombudsman, not associate, so that's a technical change that I will make if the amendment is passed, and in the original resolution as well.
Any further discussion?
Yes, Madam President, So, is it possible that we can accomplish Laura's suggestion to the amendment by stating the positions and not the candidates' names?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So, Mr. Jones, apologies for, Madam President. To clarify, what you're asking is for the original sentence to only apply to assistant ombudsman positions. Is that correct? So what we would do is insert a new clause on line 28 that reads, "Be it further resolved that the waiver granted by the State Board of Education only applies to the 2 assistant ombudsman positions." Is that correct?
That's what I'm suggesting, if that accomplishes Ms. Phelan's request.
I actually think we'd have to be much more specific if I'm reading this correctly. I think what the state board's intent is to make an exception in 2 very specific cases. And I think if we include the language in Mr. Whedon's amendment, it actually creates a situation where those are exempted positions from here on out.
Madam President, may I suggest then that we note that be it further resolved that the waiver granted by the State Board of Education only applies to current incumbents in the assistant ombudsman position?
I would welcome that, but that is not exactly what Joe had in mind, I think. So,
just point of information, one is a current position, the other has not yet started. So if there's a way to include that language for the current position and the individual to who an offer is being made for this position. But again, I'm not privy to the details of where that offer is in the process.
Madam President, might I suggest that we name our current employee, because that employee is already, and describe the other role as the current vacant assistant ombudsman. Would that be a friendly amendment?
So I'd prefer to move it as a separate amendment. Let's get what we've got clearly on the table, on the books, and then let's move that forward.
Any further discussion on the amendment?
Call the question, please.
I will ask for all in favor of adopting the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment carries. Mr. Whedon, do you have another amendment?
So I would like to move a new amendment that would add be it further resolved that the waiver granted by the State Board of Education applies only to the current assistant ombudsman, Clarence Park, and the currently open assistant ombudsman position.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Joe, would you consider a friendly amendment to strike the second part of that so that it applies only to the current sitting ombudsman, assistant ombudsman, Clarence Park?
I would, if we can also find a way to accommodate the ombudsman's request for the other position. So yes, and let's work in language for that other position.
What? It doesn't, that's the complete opposite of what she wants.
Suggestion, why don't we wait until we find that person in place and then amend this resolution?
So I'll accept Ms. Phelan's recommendation as friendly.
As will I.
Point of
A-
information,
any
Madam
further-
President. Point of information, it's my understanding that for the currently vacant position that a conditional offer has already been made. Is that the case?
Yes, sir.
So would it not be in order for us to just include the name of the person who's been given the conditional offer?
Just as a point of discussion, when that position was posted, we knew the residency requirement was part of the deal. And so I understand and I believe that we should create an accepted situation when someone's already in the role, and because of administration and miscommunication over the years between the State Board and the Department of Human Resources, that position was filled by someone who lived outside the district. That just doesn't seem fair to that person to sort of pull the rug under him and change the rules. But in the second case, we aren't changing the rules. This is actually the set of rules we knew going forward, and so that is why I don't think that it's right, and that's why I've asked for this friendly amendment.
Madam Chairman,
Ms. Wanberg?
it was my understanding that if we accepted the person who was already on staff and did not make an exception for the second person with, I guess, the pending employment offer, that the ombudsman would in fact be in a position to make that hire, to make that choice, to use her new authority under the new legislation to exempt that person, to waive the residency requirement. Is that correct? That was my understanding.
As a matter of information, the bill providing that authority is not yet law. And so that authority would not reside in the ombudsman until after that bill becomes law.
And we don't know when that will happen?
No. There is a 6-month provision for once you start employment in the accepted service, you have 6 months in which to either move into the district or technically lose your employment status. So the board does have an additional 6 months from the day that the new employee would join the ombudsman staff to either present another resolution or the ombudsman could do the waiver at that point.
Well, presumably during that 6 months, the legislation would be logged and the ombudsman would be in a position to make this waiver on her own, correct?
I can't comment to that because it's a congressional calendar issue, and so there's some other issues involved, so I can't say definitively when that bill will become law.
Madam President? As it appears that we're not under a definite timeline for the second position, I call the question on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Whedon. All in favor of the amendment? Say
Aye.
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 Opposed? The amendment has carried.
Madam President, there's one more amendment.
All right, I'm gonna call a vote on the full resolution.
No, I'm sorry, I already said that before you called the question.
I'm sorry. Oh, you have another amendment? I'm
This is
sorry.
really simple. Just in line 25, to make sure there's coherence in this resolution, I think we need to cross out or delete "for all positions." And it needs to be replaced with the language that, of Joe's amendment.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Any more discussion? All in favor? Say
Aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed? And then. All right, so now we're going to vote. All in favor of passing the amendment, the resolution? All in
Aye.
favor of passing the resolution?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is approved. Yeah. The State Board welcomes public participation in activities under our authority. At every public meeting, we begin with testimony from public witnesses on educational-related matters. If you are a member of the public and would like to speak at a future public meeting, please contact our staff at SBOE at dc.gov or by calling 202-741-0888. Tonight, Amoni Banks, Dr. Austin Nichols, Dominique Little, Marilyn Holmes, excuse me, Ms. Holmes, and Shantae Sale have joined us. Okay, excuse me, I lost my place. Would you please come up to the table? All right, we will start from my right, your left, and you each have 3 minutes, and you can begin when you're ready. Please note that you must have your microphone on, and to activate your microphone, you have to hit the green button on the base. The same button deactivates your microphone when you're not speaking. You will also see on your upper right side of the witness table a timer. The light will be green for the first 2.5 minutes of your presentation and will turn yellow at the last 30 seconds and will turn red after 3 minutes. Please, thank you for coming tonight. Would you please begin? Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Amon Banks. I'm a resident of Ward 5, but my daughter, who's sitting over here with my wife, they go to Francis Stevens, School Without Walls of Francis Stevens. This has been an ongoing issue for me for the last probably 2-3 months. Some of y'all might know me. If you don't, this is my issue. Buses. Now, when I went to the first meeting many moons ago, I talked to David Grasso on his Committee on Education and talked about how DCPS buses not being utilized to the point where kids can use the buses to go on field trips. When I spoke to the principal at School Without Walls, he explained to me that the buses are owned by OSSI. Thank you for being here today. So I was voicing my concerns and saying, hey, this is the issue with Metro and this climates when it comes to cold weather or extreme heat. You shouldn't have young kids like my daughter walk in the streets of DC to try to get to these field trips. It shouldn't be a stressor for a kid to go to a field trip and on top of that, not enjoying the field trip because they got to worry about other things. So I took it upon myself and if I can give you, I've been out talking to other parents and we have signed petitions. I just want to, can I give them to you right now? Would you just like this? Okay, give me 1 second. These are signatures from parents.
Yeah, you may have to repeat that when you go back so it can record.
These are signatures from parents from School Without Walls. The issue is that they didn't understand that our taxpayer dollars go to fund these buses, but yet we don't have full utilization of the buses. We understand that these buses are only given to special needs kids, which they do need them. We're not negating that, but we also feel like these buses need to stay. Now, also in that package, you also see a memo from OSSI saying that if a school want to use the bus, we have to pay. I feel like no school should have to pay to utilize taxpayer buses that's already been given and been funded by the people of DC. Now, with the issues that's going on right now with Metro, I asked that OSSI actually put a hold on the memorandum and allow buses to be fully used and access to any teacher to allow the kids to go to any field trip. Knowing when it's inclement weather or any other issues, they should be able to call the bus depot and say we need 2 or 3 buses and allow kids to go on field trips. No school, with School Without Walls, has to go through their budget to also rent buses to take kids on field trips. There's other issues too as well. One is, I got 20 seconds to say about Common Core. Common Core is terrible, especially when it comes to the math part. My daughter's been going through, and we've been teaching her traditional math. We don't do Common Core in my house because it doesn't work. For one regular math problem, it takes my daughter about a minute to do a 3-digit math problem when it comes to adding and subtracting. And other issues like that have been heard around the school when you have other parents at the PTA, and my wife is part of the PTA, and then parents feel like Common Core math need to be revamped and also need to be looked at again because there's no data saying that it actually works, especially in the DC area, and it's only frustrating the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Introduce yourself.
Hi, okay, my name is Dominique Little. I'm a parent of a student at C.W. Hurst Elementary School and Ward 7. I'm here tonight to talk about this DCPS local wellness policy. In the policy, it states that every DCPS student should have 20 minutes of recess. This school, I know it's other DC public schools that are taking these kids' recess away from them as a form of punishment, which is against this policy. But I'm focusing right now on C.W. Hurst Elementary because I see it happening. I have 5 members of a project that I'm developing now called the School of Student Council and Junior A and C, where I bring these kids from C.W. Hurst Elementary School and also the surrounding neighborhood where they live in to these meetings so they can understand how to govern, how they can use their voices to make differences in their communities and their schools. So I would like to know, why is this recess policy, if it's in fact a policy from federal and DC, for these kids to have their recesses, why is this school not enforcing this? Also, I would like to talk about more funding for family involvement activities. I'm reading a paper from DCPS that says research tells us students need to feel valued, encouraged, and loved to reach their potential. It's also known that more family involvement helps students to succeed in their education. I'm looking at this budget. They have $2,000 towards family and parental involvement. We need more funding in these schools to engage more parents and activities, and not just parents, but the communities as well. And my last bullet point is, this is a community announcement for a rally tomorrow. It's Defending Public Education for All. C.W. Harris, LSAT, one of the LSAT members, the faculties, asked me to talk about this information so that parents can come out and understand what's going on about public education. It's going to be tomorrow at 3:00 p.m. Anacostia High School and Beers Elementary, Deal Middle, Payne Elementary, Simon Elementary, Thompson Elementary, and Tubman Elementary are hosting these rallies for public education for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Little. Ms. Holmes?
Good evening. Hello to the new people up on the dais. It's always a pleasure to have this opportunity to come up and talk to you guys about the educational matters that are so important to me at Total Sunshine. I'm Marilyn Holmes, the president and founder of Total Sunshine Incorporated. We've been working in this community for the last 17 years. This is actually our 17th year with an all-volunteer crew, and it's been quite a task. I want to talk just about 2 things today. I usually have one main focus, but I have to talk about the Martin Luther King Essay Contest winners. Yes, indeed, the Peace Walk and Parade this past Monday, it was just fantastic. And the young people, we gave them tablets for their efforts, the first 3 winners, the top 3. I just wanted to share their names with everyone. So first place was Unique Warner, second place was Tatiana Smith, third place was Janiah Stewart, and fourth place, Iron Forte, he's the only boy winner, and fifth place was Jakiah Featherstone. These are all students that are in school in DC, and so I'm really happy that they were able to, show that they're in support of Martin Luther King's legacy as well. As a part of Total Sunshine, we always engage with the Martin Luther King effort in the city. I'm a part of the Peace Walk and Parade Planning Committee, and so it was our pleasure to provide prizes for the young people. Now, the other point that I want to make is, of course, well, I'm hopeful that you all have at least heard about our school grade incentive program that with which we support the top graduates of the city with laptops or tablets or pieces of technology for college. This is a citywide effort. Public schools and charter schools, all the top 2 graduates, the valedictorians and salutatorians, they're invited every single year. And this year will be no different. It's going to be our 9th annual school grade reward ceremony in June. We have supported more than 500 top graduates of the city. And I was actually speaking to a gentleman at the Peace Walk the other day, and he said, well, we need to put a lot of focus on the young people that, that need to be brought onto the right track. And I said, well, we do that with our school grade incentive program and with our anti-violence life coping skills seminars. However, just because a young person gets A's doesn't mean that they have a lot of money coming from home. home. And so it's so important and just critical to us to make sure that the young people that have shown they have the capacity to succeed, as well as the diligence, you know, we have to make sure that they have what they need in order to get to college and be able to compete. And we want them to bring those talents back to the city and make a difference here. And yeah, we're just trying to do everything we can for the young people. Now, if anyone is interested in our school grade incentive program, they can feel free to reach me on the Total Sunshine hotline. It's 202-575-0462. Or just log on to totalsunshine.org. I'm going to be out here, hopefully coming, getting my attendance back together for attending these public meetings. I really appreciate this platform because every year, it's, you would think it's not, but it has been quite a struggle to make sure we have the top graduates in line with their tech tools. So I appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to coming back and meeting with you guys again. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Sale.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Good evening. My name is Shanti Sale, and I'm a Ward 2 resident and parent of 2 children attending Ross Elementary School. I'm here tonight to provide a parent's perspective regarding the proposed changes to our state accountability system as part of the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act. I want to express my support for a citywide, cross-sector accountability system that is clear, objective, and easy for families to understand. In addition, I would encourage the State Board of Education to choose concrete metrics that are fair measures of student outcomes, both academic and non-academic, rather than more subjective measures like surveys. Like many parents, when my child was first eligible for the pre-K lottery, I explored both charter and DCPS options. I researched schools both online and through conversations with other parents with a goal of better understanding each school's academic model, STEM, and arts integration and diversity of student population. One question I asked was, how well will this school serve my child academically, both at the early childhood level and as he gets older, and needs to learn foundational reading, writing, math, and critical thinking skills in a challenging and enriching environment? A related question I had about equity was, how well does this school serve children representing a diversity of racial and socioeconomic backgrounds? It's my view that parents like me are interested in and value many pieces of information about a school's program, and we seek a very holistic understanding of a school before making a decision. Parents might be interested in whether a school offers language immersion, whether there's an arts emphasis, the student-teacher ratio, or how the school approaches family engagement. Parents might seek out one type of program for one of their children and a different for another, or like me, they might find that the same school is a fit for both children. However, not every piece of information about a school's program should be part of the state accountability system. The summative rating a school receives is an important indicator of quality for parents. Therefore, we must choose a reasonable number of important measures that are applicable across all public schools. I believe the best way to take into consideration the diversity of public school models in our city is to focus the accountability system on student outcomes. Let's measure how students are doing both academically and with regard to important non-academic factors like graduation and attendance. Measures like PARCC absolute performance, growth on PARCC, graduation, attendance, and re-enrollment are concrete, clear, and objective, which mean that parents like me across the city can clearly make comparisons school to school. I realize that some people have lobbied the state board to make student academic performance only a small part of how schools are rated, with subjective measures like student or teacher surveys being given more weight. As a parent, I would be very concerned that such a move would water down the rating system, making all schools look good via a Lake Wobegon effect. This would make it hard for parents to know which school would really meet their child's needs. In addition, some of those more subjective measures are truly unproven as to whether they are valid when part of an accountability system rather than simply reported out publicly. Even though I support gathering feedback from students, teachers, and parents, I worry that surveys could become biased or gamed if they were a big part of the accountability system. Instead, I'd recommend sharing survey data publicly, such as a state report card or providing funding for a cross-sector pilot program. In sum, I believe parents, educators, and community members should have access to an easy at-a-glance view into school performance that is honest about the differences between schools and really shows how students are learning and progressing. Parents like me deserve clear, objective information about how a school is serving students. I believe that the current proposal from the state superintendent sets us on the right path. I would ask my board representative from Ward 2 and all board members to work with OSSI to ensure we keep the focus of the accountability system on academic quality, both student achievement and student growth over time, as well as objective student engagement and school climate measures like graduation, re-enrollment, and attendance. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was interested in hearing what you had to say. That's why that you
Oh,
finished.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. And we would like to have copies of your testimonies. If you don't have them tonight, you can email it to the office, please. Thank you.
I have another set of signatures if you want them to as well. And I just want to know any feedback. I know at other council members, meetings, we do have feedback, we do have dialogue. I'm just curious, because this has been an ongoing issue for many schools, especially our schools, when we don't have proper transportation to get our kids to field trips. Is there anything that the board can say to us right now to give us some reassurance that we'll take a look into the situation? It's an ongoing concern. As you see the signatures I did pull, these are registered voters, and these people are very concerned about the issue that's going on. And we just want more feedback saying that we're just working on it, because for the last 3 council meetings I've been to, that's all I've been getting. So does it need to take more parents to walk into the building, or do we need to be more engaged?
Our Ward 5 State Board of Education representative, would you leave your contact information? He will get in contact with you.
And we want to know data on also Common Core education too as well. When it comes to Common Core, we see a lot of parents are frustrated. Teachers are not being taught properly, trained properly to do it. And also, as well as parents are being frustrated because we can't help our kids when the kids come home with this work. Now, I done spoke about this on many occasions to the councilman, and they see it, but we keep getting here the same thing. We're working on it. Now, I'm coming to this meeting. Now, we'll keep coming back, and I'll bring more parents and more signatures. But the problem is that you shouldn't just push us away knowing that this is a concern of many parents. When me and my wife, we have degrees, and we're still frustrated trying to help our kids. And when we look at the budget of how much money is being spent on certain things, and our school has just lost $200,000, and we're still at full enrollment. These are some of the concerns, but yet nobody comes to us. So it seems like our pleas are being fell on deaf ears. I just want to know, can we have a dialogue? We don't have anybody else in here right now. So can a dialogue be had right now?
Yes. Mr. Banks, we are a State Board of Education, and we don't have jurisdiction over some of the issues you're discussing.
Well, the issue about buses, OSSI is here right now.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
But we evolved to try to help you and your ward with the problems. Your Ward 5 State Board of Representative person, Mark Jones, will contact you, and we will see what we can do to help you.
But the school falls in Ward 2 as well.
Madam President, 2 things. One, I'm happy to work with my colleague, Mr. Jones, and our at-large member, Ms. Carter. School Without Walls at Francis Stevens is in my ward, and I will work on this issue. I have been working on busing issues at School Without Walls at Francis Stevens with OSSI regarding traffic patterns. With that, I know I'm out of order in speaking right now, but I'd like for us to get back to, unfortunately, our agenda. But we do hear you, and we are working on these issues.
Please leave your contact information. Thank you. According to the change in the agenda, we will now take ESSA committee report. Ms. Wattenberg.
Hi, thank you. So I want to start with what I think is very interesting. I don't know how many people watched Betsy DeVos's confirmation hearings yesterday. She was being, she is up for education secretary, and there were very interesting committee hearings. And in it, Senator Al Franken, who many of you may know, who are at least my age or older, is a great comedian, and he's now a senator.
And one of the things that he asked her about was the difference between growth and proficiency in testing. And it appeared that she was not well briefed on this issue. And what I wanted to say is one of the wonderful things about all the discussions that we have been having on the State Board of Ed and with all of our colleagues in OSSE, our superintendent, our colleagues in the audience, is I think there is nobody who has been involved in these discussions who would be caught flat-footed about the difference between proficiency and growth. And for that, I am thankful to all of you. Let me just say a couple of things, and then I'm going to open it up for some comments before we hear from our superintendent about the broader ESSA plan. First of all, there has been just an enormous amount of interest in the ESSA plan. It is delightful. Sometimes some of us on the State Board of Ed think, wow, we don't get our hands on the things that really matter to us. And we are getting calls and calls about this. We are hearing from advocates and parents and school leaders and institutional leaders who are passionate, who love OSSE's plan. We are hearing from people who hate OSSE's plan, and we are hearing from people who want all of us to find a compromise. We're hearing about a lot of very important issues, including this issue about growth and proficiency. I really welcome this discussion. I encourage people who are watching, people out there, to continue letting us know what we think, what you think. If we want a system of accountability that really will cover all of the schools in all of our sectors, as one of the speakers pointed out, it's critical that the various stakeholders in these different systems have a real opportunity to make clear what's important to them, what's working, what they worry about going forward, and to make sure that their concerns are addressed and that they don't feel as though just one system is being imposed on everyone. The other thing I want to say, it is complicated. You know, there's been a lot of discussion around the national politics about how people live in our bubbles. I've been talking with people since the spring, as have many of my colleagues. At our ward meetings, I've been talking with parents, teachers, and principals at school meetings in my ward. I know others have been doing so. I've been talking with people in the charter sector, in the DCPS sector, families, parents, advocates, leaders. And what I realize is what incredible bubbles we live in. People in those two sectors, people at the top and the bottom of the stakeholders, really don't talk to each other in a way that people understand each other's issues. And I really think this is an opportunity to do so. I want to say just two final things. Part of why it's complicated is a lot of this stuff is technical and it's detailed, and I think it's important for us to get to some smaller technical working group meetings where we can solve some of these problems, because I think they are solvable in ways that most people will find amenable. And also, going back to the bubbles, I think part of the issue here is that we do all have our fingers on different parts of the elephant, on 1 part, 2 parts, 10 parts, and this is a huge elephant, and we really need to be talking across lines with each other to figure out what will work. We had considered our committee, and our committee has 6, now 7 people, so it's a lot of people up here. We had considered bringing a resolution to sort of put forward some of our concerns going forward. And we decided we didn't want to do that, and rather what we're going to do, this is our last opportunity before OSSE prepares sort of a final plan that will go out to the community. And what we do want to have an opportunity to do is just for people on the committee insofar as they want to, or people on the board insofar as they want to raise any concerns they have or non-concerns they have, so that we can leave the OSSE folks with our best wisdom as they go off to make a report. And I also want to say this is the last time we'll see you in this setting before there's such a report, but we really do hope to be working closely with you in the couple weeks before that happens. So with that, let me just ask if there are folks from the committee or from the board who would like to make some comments, and then I'll call on them, and I'll just end with something.
Madam President.
Mr. Batchelor.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd like to thank Ms. Wattenberg for all of the work that she's done on the ESSA committee. And I also want to thank her for welcoming me and the other new members to be involved in those committee discussions as we joined a couple weeks back, and for inviting us to join the committee as we continue this work. I know I'm probably not the only new member who feels a little handicapped joining this discussion in its waning days, but I think due to you, Ruth, and Ossie, we've gotten, the new members have gotten some pretty good information. I think, like Ms. Wattenberg, I am very interested in making sure that we strike the right balance in Ossie's final plan. You know, I represent just as many public schools as charter schools in Ward 8, and so we definitely want to make sure that we have a uniform way to assess our schools, but we also want to make sure that schools that are doing good work with our students and who still have a little ways to go but are making strides are treated fairly in this accountability system. So that will be my focus as we continue these discussions, and I look forward to working with Ossie to ensure that all of the members feel comfortable making a vote like this when we meet in March. And I think there was a desire by me and some other members of the committee to ensure that we saw some modeling around the proposed structure, so that we know how it fits with the current state of our schools. And I think that's a very important step that we want to make with Ossie, if they're willing, to ensure that we can see what this plan and what these metrics look like in action. I think that'll put me in a very good space to take this to my residents as we begin public engagement next month. And my desire is to work with Ossie. I know they put in extra time with us even though over the past couple weeks, but my plan is to work just as diligently over the next couple weeks to make sure that we have a plan that all of us can agree on before we take it to the public next month. So thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Ms. Wattenberg. And I'll give my time back. And Hansel as well. I'll give my time back.
Mr. Whedon?
I'd like to echo, thank you, Madam President. I'd like to echo many of the comments already. And I'd like to thank Ossie for their work. This is a very complex issue. There are many competing interests and perspectives on the issues. And I think we're all in agreement that we want one system. And quite frankly, we have one system. It's a system under No Child Left Behind. And for a long time, it has not been public and transparent, and we've used two systems, but we have one system. And our challenge is to make that one system the system that all parents can use, that is user-friendly and gets the information that parents want to see. Clear, concise, concrete, objective. I think we all share those concerns that was just brought up to us from public testimony. What I've heard from Ward 6 parents, though, is that they want more than test scores, and they want a greater emphasis on growth, leveling the playing field for those schools that have students who are years and years behind coming into their school. When a school has when a middle school, my daughter's middle school, is rated as a failing school, but over half, I think it's closer to 80% of students coming into the 6th grade are reading at a 2nd grade level, that school is never going to be viewed by a rating system that has an emphasis on proficiency as successful. So we've got to find ways to highlight the growth that's going on in our schools. I look forward to working the public engagement sessions over the next couple of months and working to find something that best serves the interest of students, not necessarily the best interest of the adults. Let's keep the focus on the students and ensure that we develop a system that allows us to identify where and what types of interventions will help our students achieve.
Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree. I want to echo Mr. Batchelor's comments about our committee chair, Ms. Wattenberg. She's been very diligent in her activities and very deliberate. I also want to thank my constituents and others who have come to this meeting and many other meetings that the State Board has hosted around these issues. Accountability is really, really important for our city, and we have been very successful in our education reform efforts over the years. I don't want to take my foot off of the gas, and I think none of us at this dais want to do that. Also, understanding that academics and assessments are the best way that we have available to ensure that students are learning everywhere. It was Congressman Bobby Scott, who is a member of the Congressional Black Caucus and the ranking member of the Education and Workforce Committee in the House of Representatives, that made sure that academic assessments were a cornerstone of the Every Student Succeeds Act. And we also get to debate a lot the difference, as Ms. Wattenberg eloquently put, and where our Education Secretary nominee did not eloquently put, there is a difference between growth and proficiency. Unfortunately, you can't get to growth and understand growth unless we have assessments. That's the only way to measure growth. You have to assess how students are learning. I think we are very close to agreement with the superintendent's office. My constituents and my colleagues have my commitment to continue to work towards a compromise, and I think we can do something that is very good, actually great, for all of our students across the city in every ward. And I look forward to the final plan and the community meetings that we'll be hosting, that OSSI will be hosting, and that many of the state board members are assisting with in the month of February. Thank you.
Dr. Woodruff.
Madam President, I would like to just echo that. I'd like to give a special thanks to Ruth. This has been an undertaking that had to be done quickly, and so we have been meeting and talking and meeting and talking. Means that there's motion going on, and that's really important. And I would like to thank the constituents of Ward 4. My phone has been ringing off the hook day and night. I must have about 20 messages a day that I respond to in the past 5 or 6 days in regards to how important our community sees this as important, that assessment is important and that growth measurement is important, and that they're supporting OSSI's proposal because of the fact that there's some way to measure growth, and that they would like to see that the schools that are growing are rewarded in a way that, because it would mean that the children that may have been behind in first grade, reading at a first grade level at third grade, but if they're growing 1.5 years a year, they can begin to look at the achievement gap. And it's really not a gap when we tend to use that word, but we should be looking at our achievement growth, because we want everybody in the District of Columbia, we want every child to grow. And the parents have said that over and over again. Their voices are constantly saying that I want my child to be able to read and write on grade level, be able to go to college if that's a choice. But I've heard a lot of parents say, I just want my child to be able to graduate and fill out a job application. And that's real important in our society today. So looking at the plan that OSSI has put before us, it gives us an opportunity to look at how to measure not just the assessment based on a raw score, but on the growth. Are our children growing? I have 2 children in DC system, and the first thing I looked for, only because of my background, was was the school just assessing, but was the school growing? and I switched my child from a school that I loved dearly because he loved it dearly, but it wasn't working for him because he needed growth. Whereas one parent spoke and said that they're able to send both their children to the same school, but that's not the case with all of us. Sometimes one school may work for one of our children and not the other. And so that's why this plan is so important, that parents are able to look at one plan in the city to help them make a good choice decision on where they want to send their children. Thank you.
Any other comments, discussion?
If nobody else wants to go, I'll take my comment. So let me just start. This is, again, thanks to the secretary. I have a paper from 74 million kids, and anybody who follows this, I just want to say this is an organization that is, among other things, very supportive of charter schools and very supportive of equity. And they put out a thing today called The Growth versus Proficiency Debate and Why Al Franken Raised a Boring but Critical Issue. And part of what he says, okay, is that judging schools based on a measure, he's explaining this to the secretary designate, judging schools based on a measure that is largely outside of their control, as proficiency would do for the reasons we've heard, can lead to a host of negative consequences. And this is what the concerns are that I hear. Most simply, the wrong schools may receive accolades or sanctions. If a school with low proficiency but high growth gets closed down for allegedly poor performance, students are unlikely to benefit. This is not theoretical. Research in New Orleans found students benefited when struggling schools were closed, but only when such schools were genuinely low performing as judged by their students' growth. Since proficiency scores are highly correlated with poverty, using them to rate schools inevitably means that low-income schools will, by and large, be the ones that face the stigma and accountability pressure, potentially driving away good teachers from the schools that need them most. So I'm not going to read more, but I want to say these are the reasons why people are raising these questions, and I think Marcus is exactly right in saying that part of what we need to see is the models that can show us how this is going to work. We talked at a previous meeting about how could we do growth in high schools, and there was some sense that OSSI didn't think that could be doable at this point. And I just want to say, I was just looking at the high school proficiency rates today, and I think this is why we need to see models. I think it could mean that every single high school that's not a non-test high school in this city, even if it had terrific growth, would end up with a bad rating. And I know none of us want that, and that's why we really need to look at these models so when we go out to the community, we'll all be able to talk about that. The other thing I do want to raise is, which I've raised in a number of settings, is the tests are all about reading and math. And I'm not going to say a lot about it because we actually have somebody on a panel later about this, but there is so much evidence that especially at the early grades, being exposed to a broad, rich curriculum that includes social studies and science and the arts is so, so important, even for learning to read. In fact, especially for learning to read. And I have gotten a lot of comments about how we need to make sure we do something that helps schools feel encouraged to make sure they have a rich elementary school curriculum. And with that, I thank the committee, and we'll have more to say next month.
Thank you, Ms. Wattenberg. Thank you, committee members. The Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, as we will refer to it, is a major rethinking of educational policy in this country. I am thankful that our colleagues at OSSI have been working closely with us and look forward to learning more from them tonight about the other aspects of the Consolidated State Plan. Superintendent Kine, please begin when you are ready. Thank you.
Actually, Jessie Hartice from our staff is going to walk through the presentation. As she's coming up, though, I'll just comment by saying as I mentioned in my opening remarks and as a couple of other people have referenced, the state plan that each state education agency is required to submit to the U.S. Department of Education has a number of required components. A description of accountability is included, but there are many other sections as well. And so we thought, while our discussions obviously have focused on the accountability portion, we wanted to give you all a sense of what the full stamp plan will encompass as a preview to you all prior to heading into our community meetings. And so today's discussion will not focus on the contents, but rather just describing the elements of the template that we'll have to submit that we will be walking through as part of our community meetings again.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is Jessie Hartize, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Strategy at OSSI. As was mentioned, this is not the right deck.
Not the right deck?
No. But as we're trying to get the correct deck that's dated today up, I just wanted to provide some context on exactly what it is we're presenting this evening, which is a high level of what's included in the state plan. This is a preview. Given that many of our recent conversations have been focused on accountability, we wanted to make sure there was clarity on all of the components that are included in the state plan. And as you know, we will have an opportunity to talk about this in further detail in an upcoming working session.
I should also note that the full template that's been released by the U.S. Department of Education is on the State Board's website along with the other meeting materials. So if anyone wanted to just see the literal template that every state education agency is asked to use, that's posted online.
Okay. So in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and talk through the content that was on the slides, and then those will obviously also be available for the record, so people can reference them after. First, just a reminder as to what the Every Student Succeeds Act is. Overall, the Every Student Succeeds Act is a federal law that gives rules for states around education funding, programs, and supports for schools and students. ESSA is the newest version of a law that many of you may have heard of, ESEA, that's been in effect since 1965. And ESEA's intent is to ensure that all children have a fair, equal, and significant opportunity to obtain a high-quality education. In this process, the role of OSSI as the state is to distribute funding, set rules in areas governed by the law, provide training and support, and oversee schools. And ESSA, the most recent iteration of ESEA, begins taking effect next school year in 17-18, but some aspects will roll it out over time. Also important to note is that the Every Student Succeeds Act, pick a microphone, provides, well, additional transparency through increased public reporting, including more information about how particular groups of students, such as English learners, homeless, and foster care, and students of military families. There we go. You're with me now. All right.
Ms. Hartis, just so that you know, we're having some technical difficulties up here as well, so we can't actually see the presentation. But members, it is loaded on Assembly, so if you have your computers with you, I can send you the link. It was in the earlier email from today, so you can follow along while we're fixing the difficulties up here.
Thank you, Mr. Hayworth. So to recap in terms of the sections that are included in the state plan, as you are likely aware, as part of any good plan, it's important to first have a sense of where we're going. So a component of the plan are our long-term goals. It's also been part of our work thus far to spend time talking to people, such as you and members of the community, to build this plan as part of our consultation. And we plan to continue to track in the future as to how the work is going as part of our performance management strategy. In order to see how our goals are doing and to keep track of progress, we also have continuing effort through academic assessments to measure the progress of our kids, and have an effort to continue to support both our educators and our students through sections 4 and 5. And then lastly, in terms of all of the investments that we're making, it's important for us to have a way of knowing how all of our schools are doing, and that's what's captured in our Accountability, Support, and Improvement for Schools section. As part of our state plan, there's a requirement to set state-level short and long-term goals for PARCC, graduation rate, and English language proficiency. This is different from No Child Left Behind, where goals had to be set at 100% and required stringent action against schools that did not meet those goals. We're still in the process of considering how these goals may be factored into scoring in the accountability system, but we're clear that our goals are to become the fastest improving city and state in the nation in student achievement outcomes, and to ensure greater equity in outcomes for our students by accelerating progress for those who are furthest behind. So just as a reminder, to date, as part of the process of preparing our Every Student Succeeds Act state plan, we've had over 50 meetings with participation by more than 100 organizations. As was mentioned earlier this evening, we're preparing for the public comment period, which will begin at the end of this month and continue through early March. And our commitment to engagement will continue as we carry out our state plan. Then once our plan is out, there are 4 important stages of performance management that will be described in greater detail in our state plan. Section 3 of our plan refers to academic assessments. Under the new version of ESEA, we are required to continue to assess students at the state level once annually in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. So this is not new information, but is important information for us to continue to include in our state plan. Under ESSA, we are required to create a plan to make sure every school is a good school, and we are committed to building a system based on academic performance and other factors to be able to make those judgments. Obviously, this raises tough questions about how we define what it means to be a good school, and then also how we support those schools that are excelling and those that are behind. As was also discussed this evening, ESSA provides us with a great opportunity in DC that while we've seen tremendous progress, given the choice environment in DC, we see the opportunity under ESSA to build a common model that includes information on all schools in both sectors. We also know that it is critical for us to ensure that there's a great teacher in every school, and our state plan will outline several strategies that we are taking in each of these aspects of the educator pipeline: certification and licensure, preparing teachers and leaders, teacher evaluation and supports, professional development, and teaching for specific groups of students. It will also reference a plan that you may be familiar with, our plan on educator equity, and our strategy for continuing to ensure there's equity and high-quality educators across the city. Then the last section of our state plan refers to well-rounded and supportive education. And this will bring to bear some of the work that we're already doing about supporting early childhood, health and wellness, college and other post-secondary opportunities, as well as some additional family and community engagement efforts that are launching for the first time in the 17-18 school year. Our section on well-rounded education will also provide some additional detail on some of the specific sources of money that are available to support students. And you can read these in greater detail here, but just to provide a little bit of a glossary in terms of a translation of what these different funding sources are. And then just as a reminder, our next steps, as we've mentioned, the public comment period begins later this month, continues through the beginning of March. On our website at that time, you'll be able to review both the full state plan as well as have an opportunity to complete a feedback survey based on your review of that plan, and attend a meeting that will be held in your community. A full listing of meetings will be posted on that same webpage. And if you have any questions or additional feedback, we encourage you to write to ossi.essa@dc.gov. And all of our materials from those meetings that I referenced, including notes, are available on the OSSI ESSA webpage.
Thank you. Any questions? Board members?
Madam President?
Mr. Bachelor?
In the program-specific requirements, Title I, Part A, when you say targeting dollars for high poverty schools and for school improvement, is that in addition to what's already allocated in terms of at-risk funding? And if so, what do some of those investments look like in your minds?
So I believe the at-risk funding you're referring to is local funding. Title I Part A would be federal funding. So those are separate dollars.
And what does some of those investments look like in your mind? Has that been discussed?
So I don't envision that this funding is dramatically different from the Title I Part A funding that's been provided historically.
Mr. Whedon?
Yeah, on slide 5, you mentioned 50 meetings, 100 organizations. Could you give us some detail on who those organizations are, who they represent, parents, LEAs, administrators in schools? Who have you really been talking to? So as we do public engagement, we can make sure that we're reaching out to other and more diverse audiences.
Absolutely. All the groups that you just mentioned, in the notes, I'd have to look back on exactly what date. We've actually provided you with a comprehensive list of the folks to date, although since then it's been updated. So if you check back on our website by early next week, we'll actually have the list of folks that have been engaged to date, so that will be more thorough. But in terms of broad categories, all the groups you just mentioned have been among those that we've touched.
And is there a summary of input available as well, or can that be made available? A summary of the public comments.
So on our website, notes from all of the meetings are available.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Madam President. I have a question in reference to the McKinney-Vento Act and the support for homeless children. Can you give me some idea on what are the requirements under the Act?
So I'm frankly not the best person to speak to the specifics, and I don't want to speak out of turn, so I'm happy to have our team follow up with more specific details.
Okay. Hi, Shauna Young, on my own. Shauna Young, Chief of Staff at OSSI. Broadly, it outlines the requirements of schools for providing services and supports to homeless students, and OSSI's role as the state is to provide further guidance and supports as well as oversight to the schools to ensure that students are getting those specific services, and we can follow up more about the explicit details.
Okay,
Things
yeah.
that OSSI does include monitoring, training, and providing other types of data and technical supports.
Okay, yeah, if you could follow up, I'd like to know specifically how it's administered and
Absolutely.
what support is offered to the
can do that.
schools. Thank you.
Madam President?
Ms. Weidenberg is next.
Yeah, I have a few questions. I think that part of what has to happen in the plan, I think, is that you need to identify how you're going to judge the schools. In other words, we've talked about the rating, but are we going to have 4 tiers or 3 tiers or 5 tiers, or do we know that? Second, what about the interventions? That's a really important part of this. Under the new law, they have to be, high-quality research-based interventions, and I wonder what they are, and sort of per what Marcus had raised and others, what's new? In other words, so we have this money, we've had this money. Is there new stuff that's going to be taking place in terms of the interventions or in terms of the use of the Title I funds?
There are some specific technical changes in terms of how the Title I funding works, but I think we'll be better equipped to provide more detail on that when we provide the full detail of the state plan. In terms of broad ratings and interventions, some of that information has been in some of the technical documents, but again, I think will be more detailed in the plan, and we'll be able to provide some more detail in some of the next working group meetings.
Can we get the
I would invite
technical
you to
documents?
also look at the deck that was provided at our working session last Friday that we shared with you that had some additional detail on the classifications as well.
On the tiers?
Yes, currently we're not thinking of referring to them as tiers, instead as stars. And so we'd invite you to review that deck so that we can have a productive conversation at our next working session based on what questions you still feel are unanswered.
Absolutely. And anything in terms of the new interventions, or interventions that meet the new research requirements?
There was some information on that also in the information that was shared last week. As you know, we ran out of time because we were having a lively discussion, and the decision was made to share that deck for you all to review on your own and to follow up with us with specific questions. So
Thank you. We will do that. Can we also see the technical documents? Are they on the website?
I'm not sure which.
Well, you were just indicating that information on the ratings were in technical documents, and you just said that.
I'm by technical documents, I meant those that were provided to you.
The slide decks.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the naming confusion.
My questions were pretty much in line with Ms. Wattenberg's. I was wondering about the structure of the tier system, and I will go back and look at some of those slide decks, because I do believe that'll be important in how we assess kind of the utility of the metrics that we're using. And I know that's a more specific discussion that we're having throughout the month. So I'd like to, I'll go back and look at that, but I would like to make sure that the metrics we're using and the tiers or stars that we're using kind of makes sense citywide. So thank you.
Absolutely.
No further, Ms. Wilson.
I know your presentation today is mostly about process and overarching outline, and this is probably going to come out of left field. So completely feel free to defer. But one thing that I've been thinking about as I've been listening to both my colleagues, you all, and a number of parents who have reached out, is people want to find some kind of indicator beyond test scores, right? That indicate school quality in some way or another. And I know there are all kinds of challenges associated with using something like a climate survey, both in how it's administered, the cost of its administration, its ability to actually reach proportionate populations and reveal something that would be meaningful and actually lead to student improvement. But one thing I'm wondering is whether you have researched the correlation between growth and climate. So one would assume that in schools that have really positive climates, you should see significant growth. So I do wonder if you know anything about that, and again, feel free to defer. And number two, if that correlation exists, could we be talking about growth as it relates to improvement in student performance as a proxy for school climate?
I don't think we're technically prepared with enough research to comment on that. I appreciate the inquiry, and we can certainly see what we can find in terms of the research base. Yeah.
Thank you. I know it was sort of out in left field, but thank you for looking into it.
Yeah.
Writing down so we can do something about it.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
And as we wait for RC to return, and thank you so much for coming out to us again. We really appreciate it. I'd just like to announce that our student representative, Alexander Durson, just came in. Thank you for making the meeting. Thank you. Seeing that there are no further questions, we will move to our panel of witnesses tonight. I am pleased to recognize Barbara Davison, President of Standard Works Incorporated. Ms. Davison, you will have 5 minutes to provide your testimony, followed by a round of questions from board members. I would ask, if you have not already done so, to please give us a copy you have. Thank you. And please note that you must use the microphone and push the button. Thank you.
I need to push the button on.
Okay.
Oh, it's already on? Okay, great. Thank you for having me here this evening. The last time I testified before the State Board was 10 years ago in the context of DC's overhaul of its academic standards, standards that went on to receive national recognition as some of the most rigorous in the country, and that as a consequence actually played a big part in shaping the Common Core state standards. DC standards also drove a significant curriculum project within DCPS, one that involved hundreds of area teachers, and I believe really set the stage for some of the wonderful curriculum work happening throughout the city today. I'm proud of the role that standards work played in that stunning turnaround, really, of a major urban school district. When we started here in 2004, there was a report by the Council of Great City Schools
that had just been released saying that DC was one of the worst performing city school districts in the nation. And now it's the darling of ed reform, a proof point for what's possible. So congratulations really to all of you that have been involved in that. During the years in which DC was reinventing itself, standards work has done the same, and we recently relaunched in order to promote a mission every bit as important as our previous work in standards and school accountability. Our goal now is to encourage a higher standard of practice in the field, practice that's based on real knowledge of what does and does not work. As you probably know, ESSA has over 100 references to the phrase evidence-based practice. The law's push for evidence acknowledges that while we know far more than we did 20 or 30 years ago about how children learn and how we can be more effective teachers, we simply have not cracked the code on bringing that knowledge into the classroom. A big focus of ESSA's guidance has been on what qualifies as strong research. And this is a good thing, since the field of education is notorious for making claims and launching reforms that are ostensibly evidence-based but are often founded on poorly conducted research that crowds out to the detriment, the extreme detriment of those on the ground, the knowledge of really relatively simple instructional strategies or shifts in practice that have proved time and time again to make teaching more consistent and effective. In the opinion of standards work, there is no evidence more compelling nor worthy of leadership's deliberate efforts than that which affirms the importance of curriculum. Curriculum particularly that sequences the building of background knowledge, the linchpin of all learning. In the weeks ahead, standards work will be releasing the results of a comprehensive literature review conducted by Johns Hopkins University, which describes a preponderance of evidence about the positive impact of well-designed curriculum and the potentially profoundly, the profound compounding effect that strong curriculum can have over the 13 years of a child's schooling. The importance of curriculum that is comprehensive, sequential, and content-rich simply cannot be overstated. And by content-rich, I am largely thinking of social studies, science, and the arts, subjects that need to permeate the school day but are instead getting fit in as time permits, and we know how that goes. So what's a state school board, the school board's role in promoting evidence? One significant appeal that I would like to make to you is that you not get carried away, at least at the start, with creating new evidence, but that you instead recognize the biggest challenge LEAs might face is in disseminating and using what is already known. One of the reasons standards work relaunched itself is to promote a body of work contained in practice guides that have been published over the past decade by the Institute of Education Sciences. These guides represent an invaluable collection of validated practices which should form the foundation of educator training and practice. Not only do the studies on which these guides are based meet the highest of evidentiary standards, they have been selected by experts because they're practically important, statistically significant findings have been replicated in a range of classrooms. Sadly, these guides are virtually unknown to the field. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of the kinds of things, the kinds of pearls of wisdom that are contained in these guides. It turns out that to help students remember key facts, concepts, and knowledge, teachers should arrange for students to be exposed to concepts on at least 2 occasions, separated by a period of several weeks and even several months. Research has shown that this delayed re-exposure often markedly increases the amount of information that students remember. Here's another one affecting English language learners. We should integrate oral and written language instruction with content area teaching, using content-rich texts, thus providing structured opportunities to engage students in academic discussions about the content and teaching academic vocabulary. Finally, preschool and primary teachers should foster literacy using read-alouds. Read-alouds are recommended to develop students' inferential language, as well as to ensure that students learn new academic vocabulary. I'm sure that this newfound freedom that ESSA has given you is probably a bit overwhelming based on the smart moves that this board has made in recent years, and that together with the local education agencies with which you're working, I have every confidence that you're going to do it brilliantly. My best advice is follow the evidence and set the highest standards for the evidence that you're looking at.
Thank you for your insight. Members, we will have a single round of questions this evening. Who would like to begin? A question? Ms. Wattenberg?
One of the areas that I think you're working in is the whole issue of curriculum and the importance of, as I mentioned earlier, the broad curriculum, especially in the early grades for social studies, science, and the arts. And I think on your site, there's a study that I have here that shows that in the time since 2000, sort of right around when No Child Left Behind was introduced till I think 2012, the instructional time that had gone down, given to social studies and science in K-3 has gone down from 40 minutes a day to about half of that, I think. Right. And I wonder if you want to, I'm not sure I have my numbers exactly right, that's roughly them, but if you could comment on how that affects reading, because I know one thing in DC is our reading proficiency scores are very, very, very low. And I think there is, and this is part of what you heard earlier, there's a lot of sense in the city, in schools, that the way to fix that is to spend many more hours on, quote, reading. What's the effect of that when you don't bring in the science and social studies?
Right. I think that the information that you're citing comes from something called the National Survey of Science and Mathematics Education, and the last data that we have is from about 2012. And by the calculations that I did, basically our students are spending, and this is of course across the country, but the young children in K through 3 are spending less than 10% of their time in school on both science and social studies. And at the grades 4 through 6, that's just a tiny little bit more of about 12.5% of their day. And yet I would challenge any of us to think about those, the knowledge that we want and what we really aspire for our children to get out of school. And obviously, it's, probably the first things that come to your mind are some of those subjects. The impact on reading, and some of this is really the result of this new knowledge that we possess about how children learn to read. It turns out that the ability to decode is something that is a very systematic, prescribed. We've actually done quite well in terms of progress in teaching children to read up until about the 3rd grade. But our scores are stagnant and they're not moving at all past that, and it's because children are not being exposed to this knowledge. So they're encountering words that they simply have not been introduced to. They're encountering concepts that they, Dr. Hirsch, who many of you have heard, founder of the Core Knowledge Foundation, refers to this as the Velcro of learning. And it turns out that it really is impossible to, learn more if you don't possess this. You have to have that content to sort of hold things onto. So really, in fact, the reading, and you and others have done a beautiful job of talking about this. Our reading tests really are tests of background knowledge, and there's just simply no way around the fact that until that students are going to score poorly on these tests despite their ability to, perhaps read the passage, if they don't have if they have not been exposed to these words and to some of these concepts, they simply can't hold as much information in their head as they're going to need to get through to the end of the passage and ask these questions about main idea and inference and compare and contrast and all of the other skills that they're being asked to, that they're going to be tested on. If they don't have that Velcro for some of the concepts and indeed possess the academic vocabulary, just simply the exposure to some of the words that they're not going to get without being, these words are words that we encounter as we learn about history, science, arts, and so forth.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here and
Nice to
staying
see
this
you in this
the length of the
context.
meeting. Appreciate it. Can you just go back to that statistic you stated a moment ago? Did you say 12.5% of their time on science and social studies combined?
Yeah, now, I'm going to hasten to say that the study itself talks about the, the amount of time. So that percentage that I gave you is my calculation based on a 6-hour day. So, you could probably say, well, we need to subtract out the time that they have lunch and so forth. But during the time, if you figure sort of a 6-hour school day, the numbers are that in 2016, K through 3 students are getting about 16 minutes of social studies instruction a day. They're getting about 19 minutes of science instruction a day. And 4th through 6th grade students are getting about 21 minutes of social studies instruction and about 24 minutes of science instruction. And, I'm going to, the really interesting thing here as well is that surveys of teachers report that when struggling students are pulled out of class for a variety of reasons, they are, for the most part, being pulled out of social studies and science classes, about a little bit more from social studies. So I think these numbers could in fact be inflated, as horrifying as that notion is.
And does the study extend beyond grade 5? And is it longitudinal or it's a 1-year snapshot?
Pardon me?
Is it longitudinal or it's just a 1-year snapshot?
No, it actually looks at data at points in time. This particular report that I've got in front of me is looking at how it, I think it's talking about how No Child Left Behind had an impact on it. But actually, in 1977, we had some modest increases up until about 2000 in that time, between 2000 and 1977, but then lost it again, after 2000.
And I'm sorry to keep going on these details, but it's just good to have the overarching context. And so when you're saying some modest gains, or, relatively speaking, so when I hear
talking about minutes, right?
You're talking about minutes. So are you saying that, before it was 20 minutes and now it's 18 minutes, or is it more dramatic?
No, let's see. Here's 4th grade, 4th through 6th grade science. In 1977 was 28 minutes, went up to a whopping 31 minutes in 2000, and down to 24 minutes in 2012.
Okay,
so
that's really helpful context, because then that actually indicates that this isn't necessarily something that's a new generation associated with No Child Left Behind per se. Because I was going to say those numbers actually correlate with my own education experience quite closely. And I also wonder, do those numbers, to your understanding of how they were brought about, isolate the kinds of content that you might have in a language arts class anyway? For example, my children are doing social studies almost all day long, really.
Your children are really, really lucky then, and I think that was the one positive note that I wanted to leave you with. This is talking about time spent that's sort of dedicated to
in
that.
A subject.
The future really is in, and I feel quite positive about the possibility because there are some really good efforts going on where the English language arts block is integrated, and so that the texts that are used, this is a nascent field, but it's a very, very exciting one, and it's a big part of what the Knowledge Matters campaign that I'm associated with it exists to, and in the months ahead, we expect to be putting on our website some sequences and recognizing some good curriculum out there that is doing a nice job of building into its English language arts block. There's no reason kids aren't reading about this, stuff in that time, but it needs to be sequential and not random. Random acts of content is maybe a little bit better than no content at all, but it's not nearly as good as this carefully sequenced cumulative experience. And that's where that real compounding effect that this report that we're talking about is going to start to really show up.
Great. I would just say that, we've heard a lot, I think over the last 2 years, about the concerns related to science and social studies decreasing because of the increase in test scores. And if that data is indicative of anything, it's not actually a huge decrease. And so, I don't know, I just think we really need to ground our perspectives in the data and not just make assumptions that because there's increased testing, it means that those subjects are going by the wayside. It might be the case, but I'm just saying that the data you just shared wouldn't have indicated that.
Thank you. Well,
I have a comment.
oh, I'm Dr. Woodward.
Thank you. As I listen to you, and as a former educator and teacher, and in today's world, going into the classrooms from when I taught 30 years ago and today, I have seen more and more classrooms where it's integrated, where social studies and science is a part of the literacy package.
Excuse me, could you speak up?
It's part of the literacy package, and that overall, I think it's more how do we develop a curriculum that makes it more in alignment with Common Core. I believe that sectioning out learning like we did 30 years ago limits our children's ability to cross-sector their learning, as well as expand on their vocabulary and their knowledge base. And so I appreciate the statistics that was shared today, but I also want to recognize and let it be known that I believe it is something that goes beyond sectioning out science, social studies, that we have to look at the big picture today, and that's not how our children learn today. They learn through many modalities that can be incorporated in literacy. So I do appreciate what you're saying.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that I'm aware of some really important integrated curriculum work going on at DCPS. I know a little bit less about some of the charter schools, but that is absolutely the holy grail, and is you know, I think we all just need to want to be very aware of the fact that it still needs to be sequential. It does need to be knowledge building to really give the kids that Velcro that they're going to need. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Davison.
Thank you so much.
And please keep in touch as we move through this process. Thank you. Please keep in touch with us as we move through this process. Thank you. With no further business before the board, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Oh, no, it's not on here. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Now I could do it.
This your first meeting.
Thank you for your patience.